Welcome to a new episode of Mind Your Mind. I am Roxana and I want to bring you with lots of joy this new episode because I am with my friend and colleague Gaby Cabrera Kimchi. She is a functional medicine health coach specialized in women and creator of the Optimal Living Method. Welcome, Gaby.
Hello, lovely to be back again. Yeah, it's such a joy always to be here with you.
Yeah, fantastic, because you are part of the family of Mind Your Mind. And that's so great because we are coming back actually today to talk about a topic that we already touched in Spanish, but we felt it was super important to bring it in English as well, because we will be talking about peri and menopause and all about it. And I think is incredible. I mean, I feel this theme is very relevant for the many women that are professional carers, and they also may have very possibly caring roles in their homes as well. Mm-hmm. So applicable for all frontline workers that are out there internationally, and that we want to emphasize, that element of womanhood in what it is to be as well a frontline worker so many times, and a carer, professionally and at home. So, and that lead us to think about situations and stages in life like menopause and perimenopause. So shall we start with saying what are we talking about when we talk about perimenopause and all of that?
I think a lot of people really don't know what it is that we're talking about. And just to kind of make a point connected to what you said at the beginning, perimenopause comes at a time in a woman's life when they're kind of sandwiched between, having progressed very high up in their careers, possibly teenage kids, possibly girls, daughters who starting puberty, you're starting to wind down in your sex hormones, and also aging parents. So it's this very complex sandwich, I like to think of it. And then on top of that, you're starting to change, your body's starting to change. And so it's almost like a reset. I see it as physiological resets, but also a psycho-emotional reset in a woman's life. And I like to invite all of my clients to kind of see it as that as an opportunity to reset. But in terms of what actually is going on, it's a time in our lives when our sex hormones are declining, and eventually will, decline to their lowest when we enter menopause. We still produce a small amount of hormones, as in reproductive hormones after that, but not enough, obviously, in order to ovulate and to have baby. Perimenopause is the period leading up to the menopause, and the menopause is just one day in your life. It's the day after you haven't had a period for 12 months, and then you are postmenopausal after that. So it's basically, I guess, three things we're thinking about: perimenopause, menopause, and then you are officially without a period after that. There are, lots of sex hormones, but mainly we're talking about estrogen and progesterone. So in our reproductive years, they go up and down. They have this really nice flow, or a dance, I like to think of it. And they bring us, ovulation, the possibility of becoming pregnant, and then perhaps if you are pregnant, then holding that baby. That's progesterone's role. And then if you're not, then you shed the uterine lining at the end of the month and you complete a cycle. So that's their role. One of their roles, I should say. But the common myth and mistake is to think that women's hormones are only to reproduce, and they actually play lots of really important roles in the body, as we start to find out when they decline and we start to not feel great. And suddenly we have all of these very complex, seemingly unrelated symptoms that can range from hot flashes, insomnia, to mood swings, low libido, weight gain, lots of things that our hormones in our reproductive years kind of take care of without us really knowing what's going on.
And that's the thing that always amazed me, the fact that as women, we are born with a number of eggs in our ovaries that will be, used and utilized, some going out of our ovaries every single month throughout our reproductive life, but then gets to this point in which that stop happening.
Mm-hmm.
And the very reason that stop happening then will create a whole transformation in the way that we feel about ourselves, about the world, in how do we react to our relationships as well. I mean, it creates such a shift, and because our body is changing, no, and we go, and what I hear from what you're saying as well is this element of transition. And the other thing that I want to highlight is the sense of opportunity. I think today we will be talking about, all of these changes, and you already started to mention the symptoms, and we will deep a little bit more into why our hormones are so important. But I think what is important for me, and I am sure in our conversations we have touched upon this as well, the sense of opportunity, because all seems like our ovaries are stopping to work. Everything feels doom and gloom. There is a lot of symptoms that sometimes for some women are so strong, and so many that create this sensation of your world going literally upside down.
Yes.
In the middle of leading, as you were saying, probably leadership roles in their careers, having different kind of responsibilities at home with aging parents and so on. So context as well plays such an important part in all of this, that element of stress. Yes. So there is so many angles here that we are touching upon already. Go one by one, little by little. Don't lose insight that we are focusing on the opportunity that we have on hand.
That's
here,
right.
No?
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons, I think, if I might just add something that I love about functional medicine, is that sadly, all of these things we really haven't touched on because women have been less studied than men in scientific and medical literature. So it's not our fault that we don't know what's happening to our bodies, but it is our responsibility and our choice to find out what these things mean and what we can do about it. And so that's where functional medicine shines, I think, because it's allowing women, I think, to take ownership of their health and not be victims, basically. So yeah, definitely on board with what you said.
Yeah, and understanding the cause, no?
Yes.
Of the way that we are feeling, more than just focusing, these are the symptoms that we need to reduce, and that's it. That lead us to have that role that is more empowering, is full of power, really.
Correct.
And full of opportunities. What is the importance of our hormones, and how do they actually have an impact on our day-to-day life?
So hormones are basically messengers in your body. So all hormones, not just sex hormones. We're talking about, cortisol, our main stress hormone, insulin, that's produced by the pancreas in order to make sure that you're utilizing energy appropriately in the body. All of them are communicating to your body's tissues and organs the status of your world. So this is what's key. And this is a question I love to ask my clients is, what are you communicating to your hormones? And they feel like, I've never thought about that. I didn't know I could speak to them. Is there a language for that? It's basically how you eat, how you choose to nourish yourself on and off the plate, how you move, the relationships you have, all of that are communicating via the nervous system to your hormones what the status of your world is. So think of them like thermostats, at your home. If it's too hot, thermostat will come on to switch off the heating so that you don't boil. And so they have feedback loops that are informing other parts of the body what to do, when to do it. This is why you wake up. This is why you feel hungry. This is why you feel like you're ready to have babies. This is why you can have babies, or, et cetera, et cetera. So there are receptors for all of our sex hormones in almost every organ of the body. And one of the main ones is actually the brain. This is why a lot of the symptoms associated with perimenopause and menopause are brain related, they actually start in the brain because the brain is basically reconfiguring itself in
Mm.
perimenopause. And in all of women's hormonal changes, so in puberty, in motherhood, and then in perimenopause, our brain gets reconfigured so that we can adapt to the new role. So, it's actually really fascinating, but then it's also a time where our bodies are more vulnerable
Uh-huh.
because of the hormonal changes make everything a little bit more sensitive. There's more inflammation. And so we need to really look after the terrain. So I would like to just leave everyone with the fact that, hormones are messengers and we can change what they do depending on what we are doing. So this is where the choice and the opportunity comes in.
Fascinating. And if our ovaries are not functioning on producing certain hormones, where do we get them from then?
So we move from an ovarian centric life, so from puberty until you stop cycling. I'd like to think of it as an ovarian centric life. So you have a
Mm-hmm.
28-day cycle, regularly speaking, broadly speaking, that informs your body what to do. So, it actually crosstalks to lots of body systems throughout the month. So your digestion changes, the way your brain communicates changes, even your microbiome changes, your immune system changes throughout the month. Obviously, we know about moods and cognition as well. So lots of things change in the body. Your insulin sensitivity, so at certain times of the month,
Mm-hmm.
we're more able to handle carbohydrates than at other times of the month. Our metabolism slows down in one part of the month and then revs up in the other part of the month. And this is all because we have to think about humans. There are actually two priorities as a human. One
Uh-huh.
is to survive, and the other one is to reproduce. So basically, if you think about hormones, also it's helpful to think about hierarchies of hormones. So our stress hormones are the most important because they will guarantee survival. And then come basically our sex hormones. And so this is why getting stress under control, and I'm sure we'll go into this at some point, is so important to make sure that your stress hormones don't suffer from that, basically. So, yeah. I think that's the reason why it's so important to look after your cycle in that ovarian centric part of your life. But then you move into your adrenal centric part of life. So basically,
Uh-huh.
the ovaries have had their, day in the sun. And then it's the turn for the adrenals. And these are the small glands that sit on top of your kidneys that produce our stress hormones. And so this is why I think really getting a handle on stress as you're cycling into that menopause is so, so important because if, like I said, if hormones have hierarchies, if you're too stressed, your body doesn't have, it's going to use all of its resources to make sure that you survive, whether that threat is real or imagined, it doesn't matter. The body doesn't know the difference. Then we have issues with getting supplies to produce those sex hormones that we still need. It's that shift that we need to kind of really honor and I think speak more about because we're just focusing on the exiting of the sex hormones, but we're not really focusing on what's happening next and what we can do about it.
Absolutely. Yes. And the other thing that I'm thinking of is this element of a stigma, no? Either things that we may say to ourselves, considering that there is so much standards as well that especially women have to somehow follow or respond to in society, but this notion of aging
Mm-hmm.
and becoming old or older or feeling old or older, no,
Mm-hmm.
through this transition as well. And I think that is a very important stigma to sort of remove or try to transform
Mm-hmm.
somehow, no, through these conversations and having these
Absolutely.
conversations more and more
Yeah.
in every areas of our life, really, with
Mm-hmm.
our partners as well. I think one of the important aspects of my personal experience with perimenopause and menopause is that my partner was well informed. He
Yes.
actively informed himself to fully understand what was going on.
That's amazing. Yeah, you're so lucky. And that's definitely something, I'm a huge fan of. I talk to my 10-year-old boy about women's bodies, what happens. He's very well informed about all of that because, he needs to play an active role, I think, in the change that we need to see in the world.
Definitely. What do you think then will be the starting point to work towards that element of well-being that we want to maintain, no? Because we are also focusing on the idea of the need of maintaining well-being, a sense of resilience as well. But how do we do that when we are going through this process that is so challenging for the body and for ourselves emotionally and psychologically as well?
Yeah. So definitely, I'm a big fan of like easy wins and micro habits that people can implement into their daily routine. This is why I ask my clients, send me pictures of what you eat. Tell me about everything that you do in your day, because I want to make things easy for you. I don't want to, give you a long list of all these amazing things that you can do, which is just going to stress you more because you don't have time to do it. And it's just not very practical, and it can be quite overwhelming, I think, the world of wellness when, one person tells you one thing, someone else tells you something else. This is why I also do lots of blood work, because I'm a huge fan of testing, not guessing. So I actually want to know how people's biochemistry is in order to make the right changes that are going to give them the biggest return for their investment. But generally speaking, like I said, we are moving away from an ovarian-centric to an adrenal-centric part of life. Two hormones increase in this part of life, and it's cortisol. We become more stress prone and also less stress resilient. The other hormone that goes up is insulin. So we become, and this is why, for example, insulin is, like I said, it helps glucose go into the cells for our metabolism to rev up and to create energy. But also it's a fat storage, sadly, it's a fat storage hormone. And so, which is great for times of, famine. But if, we're over consuming calories, then we tend to go up in weight, especially in the midsection, which is one of the things that women in this age tend to suffer from. So those two hormones going up make it hard for us to, keep up our weight, for example, eating the same things or keeping up our routine. And we also suddenly notice that we are more likely to react to things. So maybe things that didn't bother us before really bother us now. And that's because that cortisol's up. So we are less stress resilient. So it's not like you're going crazy. Things are happening. These changes are happening in your body. So it is also a time for lots of self-compassion and, really looking at your life, taking stock and seeing where your loads are. I always ask my clients this as well, like, where are you leaking energy? Can we do something about that? And because of this combination of the high cortisol, high insulin, we need to really look after how we're eating, for example. So macro composition becomes really important, making sure that, you're having protein with every meal, that your carbs come from complex carbohydrates. So that gives us lots of fiber and stable blood sugar response rather than refined carbohydrates, for example. So making sure that with the protein and healthy fats and complex carbohydrates in every meal, we're getting that balance that's not going to make our blood sugar go up, which also raises cortisol. So these are ways that you can kind of interrupt the system, right? To make sure that you have stable blood sugar, which is going to help you also with your stress levels. Eating the rainbow is something that's super simple, that just gives you all the phytochemicals that you need. There are studies that point to that people should be eating 30 different plant foods a week, and that includes things like herbs and spices. So, teas, decaffeinated teas are brilliant for that. Making sure that you're using lots of spices with your meals, nuts and seeds, because 30 seems like a lot, because people just normally think about a massive salad, and you're like, how am I gonna fit all of that in?
How many things I can put in my
things.
salad?
But it becomes like, if you're doing, an avocado on toast, like put some sauerkraut, like a little bit of, and some sprouts, some broccoli sprouts, and then sprinkle some seeds on top, and suddenly you've got probably like 4 or 5 already. Then, I always have like a little bit of nut seed mix that I just throw in everything, whether it's stir fries, salads, smoothies are brilliant as long as they're not full of sugar and even things like lots of fruit can be too much, so we really need to look at eating less starches and sugar even from fruit, especially if it's in a smoothie format because of the glucose impact. But if you combine some blueberries, for example, with some vegetables in that smoothie, with some protein powder or collagen, and that's another way to kind of maybe start the day if you have kids and need to run out the door, have to get to work. You can do that and have it ready even in the fridge. Just pop it in the blender and you're ready to go. And you can add seeds and nuts to that as well. So there are lots of tricks and hacks that I teach my clients in order to get to that. But generally speaking, eat the rainbow, make sure that your meals are balanced, and then things like proper sleep become really important. Sleep helps us to regenerate, but also it helps to control blood sugar and stress levels the following day. So we can see, even with just wearing a constant glucose monitor, for example, how the same meal, but 2 different days. So one day you slept well and another day you didn't sleep well. That same meal is going to have a worse impact on your blood sugar because you didn't sleep appropriately. So sleep becomes super, super important, and lots of, relaxation practices, whatever that looks like for you. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be meditation. I know a lot of people shy away from it because I think people just think that they have to stop thinking, like, that they feel like they're doing it wrong when suddenly they're thinking. But actually, that's a good sign because it means that you're noticing that you're thinking. The whole idea of meditation is that, you can actually see yourself and your thoughts and be able to not identify with that. And so, I don't know if you've had an experience with this.
Actually, yesterday in my meditation practice that I do with other people every Thursday morning, the person that that guides the meditation, we normally is in silence, right? But he will give some very few directions throughout the process of the meditation, and he said something that is sticking in my mind, and I thought in sharing it with everybody. So I'm so pleased that I can share it today, because
Yay!
he said, because your mind wanders, right? And I'm explaining what he said more than what he said, which was very short, but your mind wanders. It's about what happened when you do meet yourself where you at with either the feeling, the thought, the sensations in your body. What happens if you just be with that? And there is where the element of compassion comes in as well, right? Because it's to just notice that that's happening, that is there within ourselves, without the intention of changing it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key there, that brings that element of kindness and compassion, that we invest so much effort in changing the way we feel than just noticing how we feel. Because sometimes the more we try not to think, for example, the more we try not to feel in a certain way, it's like we are feeding that we are trying to change, and in the end it becomes counterproductive, and we lose a lot of energy on that. And I think especially in this moment of peri-menopause and menopause, when, for example, the sleep pattern is quite altered as well, and that can create a lot of anxiety as well, and desperation, because if you cannot sleep and you have a busy day the following day, that things will not be working well the following day at all, apart from the brain fog and so many other things that happen during this period. So it's something about that calming practices that also bring that element of compassion and self-compassion to everything we do, and especially when we are in these periods of transition in life as well, right?
Yeah, and you're ticking a lot of boxes. So you're doing the kindness, the self-compassion, but also you're kicking in your parasympathetic nervous system. You're activating that, which is what we want to make sure that, we befriend our stress levels. So this isn't about getting rid of stress. Like I actually hate when people say that, because
Yes.
stress is, we need stress. Like if, you know, if you didn't produce stress hormones, you wouldn't wake up, basically. They are what wakes you up every day. So they are vital to lots of things, you know, priming receptors for every other hormone in the right levels. They're anti-inflammatory in the right levels. So what we need to talk about is befriending that stress response, understanding your triggers, understanding your load, and then doing changes to maybe lighten that load a little bit, you know, and befriending that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And here is when we also can use other techniques. I mean, meditation is one of the many,
Mm-hmm.
and you mentioned relaxations, techniques,
Breathing.
also breathing techniques are really
Mm-hmm.
good. And so we need to find the one that works for us.
Yes, our
Sometimes
flavor.
just,
Yeah,
our flavor, as you say, sometimes it's a walk in the park that
that's it.
will
Yeah,
help us to, go into that place of helping our system to understand, our nervous system to understand that we are safe, that
that's
we
it.
are okay, and
That's
that
it.
we can relax, no?
That's
And
it.
that will then help us to sleep better. This is making me think is that really this is what we are talking about, is creating new practices within our life, that this
Mm-hmm.
transition period, and I think that's why we were talking about opportunities at the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is also a moment to start to create new habits
Yeah.
and new ways of being with ourselves and with our loved ones as well. It means to create new ways of taking care of ourselves.
Yes. So our hormones are kind of forcing us to do that. In our
Yes.
reproductive years, we very much look outwards for, you know, acknowledgement, appreciation, you know, doing. It's all about doing, achieving, you know, having the family, the kids, the house, like all of these things. That's very, actually, when you think about it, hormonally driven. Estrogen peaks with testosterone, and it makes us look great. You know, our skin glows more, our hair looks lush. You know, we are better able to communicate because our brain, or both of our hemispheres, are talking to each other more than at any time of the month. So it's very biologically wired, all of these things that we do, you know, in our 20s, 30s, and 40s. But then when those hormones start to go, it should be an invitation to really look at what feeds you, look inwards, and how we're going to carry on living for now. If we're talking about life expectancy, I think most women will probably spend in menopause a quarter of their lives, right? And so it's a big chunk of time that we want to be healthy for, because we're living longer, but not necessarily healthier. So what I invite people to do is to, with all of these habits and practices, we are actually changing the way our genes express. And actually, we might be able to reduce our biological age, believe it or not. You spoke at the beginning about this association between menopause and aging, and this is one of the things, I think, especially in Latin America, where we come from, that we don't really talk about it because,
Mm.
you know, it's kind of like taboo, and it's not cool because it means you're old, and, you know, so nobody kind of says, "Oh, I'm going through it." It's really understanding that we've come to a place in our development of science that is telling us that what we do has a big impact on our health, that our genes do not predispose us. They predispose us maybe, but to a small percent of health outcomes. And so this is that choice and that opportunity that you spoke about at the beginning, of, you know, taking a look inside and deciding, how do I want to live for that quarter of my life that I have in front of me.
Absolutely. And one of the things now that you mentioned, everybody in Latin America that also have been listening a little bit of what we have been talking about with regards to perimenopause and menopause, is this element of taboo, but also kind of normalizing all these sensations and feelings and symptoms that we are experiencing without really taking the time to acknowledge that this is the result of a big change happening within our body, and that through just normalizing is like minimizing as well the pain,
Yes.
the discomfort, the difficulties that are created through this. And for many, living with symptoms like dizziness, that how confusing, why am I feeling dizzy now? That is why do I have these kind of sensations?
Yeah, it could be
And
quite
not
scary.
and can be scary, confusing, and why not create the space to understand
That's
what's
it.
happening with
Yeah.
us,
So
no?
yeah, it goes back to what I said at the beginning, like it's not our
Yes,
fault that we normalize these things because that's what we've been taught. I mean, if
yes.
you think about most of women's issues are always blamed on the hormones, right? And so
Mm,
what that does is, it makes us victims to our bodies. So we just, like, oh my God, okay, don't, most girls when they start their periods, what they're told is don't get pregnant, it's gonna hurt. And so that's like imprinted in their mindsets. And, most women can't wait till they stop cycling because they see it as a nuisance without really knowing that, symptomatic cycles are not okay. Our menstrual cycle is our fifth vital sign. So when things are happening, they're a symptom. But again, we normalize it because we have this
mm.
association with it hurts, it's not cool, it sucks to be a woman. And therefore, we're like, okay, yeah, just it's fine. I can't wait till I stop cycling. But that's the body telling you that something's not right. So, but it's not our fault because we haven't been taught that. Even doctors don't talk about that. They're only starting to talk about it. But it is our responsibility, I think, to find out and get informed, get educated. And there's so much you can do to change that.
Yes, and if you have very heavy periods and lots of pain,
Mm,
it's a sign that is something is going on. It's
yeah,
not just a natural thing that you have to accept and
yeah,
live with it. You
yeah.
just you do look for this is an invitation actually for all women
Hmm.
and younger women as well, to, if they are experiencing these very heavy periods and lots of pain, to have a look to what's going on there, because that's not how it should be.
Correct. Yeah. Hmm.
You mentioned eating the rainbow, sleeping well.
Yes.
Is there anyone else?
Yes.
I think,
The other one is muscle building. So muscle becomes king, really, in our perimenopause, menopause because of that cortisol insulin. So if you don't remember anything else, just remember those two hormones. They become really, really important in our adrenal centric part of life. When we build muscle, we protect bone, which is one of the leading cause of health issues for women, weakness in bone, and they lose bone density because they're losing that estrogen. So it helps us to protect our bones. And naturally, we lose bone as we age, which is also why we might become insulin resistant. The reason is
mm,
that muscle is where our mitochondria live. It's densely populated with mitochondria, those powerhouses that produce ATP. And when we eat, when our body produces glucose to store for use later, if there is nowhere to go for that glucose to go, so if muscle is the biggest depot for glucose and we lose it as we age, where does it go? It's all over our bodies. It's in our blood. That's what's creating, all those issues with higher oxidative stress and inflammation.
mm.
And so, which are two of the root causes for most chronic illnesses out there. And so, building muscle helps us to retain our strength, to protect our bones, to be great energy producers. So a lot of the fatigue symptoms that we experience, a lot of that tiredness, that wearing down, that can be prevented through muscle because you'll be producing more ATP and you'll be storing that glucose away from harm's way. So you'll be able to improve your insulin sensitivity, which is something we really, really want as we age.
Wow. Yes, and that making me think about how many times and how many people for sure have started their gym membership in January and then don't go. But here we're talking
Exactly.
about any physical activity, right? Not
Hmm.
necessarily going to the gym. Is that correct?
That is great. Yeah, no,
Yeah, okay.
I hate the gym. I've
Me
signed up
too.
so many times and
Me too.
I'm one of those people basically until I figured out how to do the workouts that I like. And so I do a lot of Pilates using my own body weight at home with a foam roll to make sure that I'm hitting that resistant training that I want. Also using small weights, and here I think less is more, especially if you haven't worked out before. So don't, listen to this and like go and lift weights because you have never done anything before. You start always low and slow because, like I said, that cortisol's higher. We're also more prone to injuries. And if you've never done any exercise before, start low and slow. So maybe just start walking. Maybe, walk for 10 minutes after meals to really help that glucose go to that the muscle or the cells where it needs to be instead of in the blood. So that's something that's very easy and accessible to people. Walk around the block, do your chores at home if you work from home, laundry, dishwasher, like doing beds, whatever. Save it for after meals. And take the stairs, instead of the lift. Get up, get off the bus, a couple of stops before, so you walk more. So they did a study where they looked at reducing people's biological ages. So this is for longevity. And all that they asked people to do was to do 30 minutes of some form of exercise that exerted their hearts to 60% of their normal baseline. And they reduced their age by, I believe it was about 3 years in 8 weeks of doing that. And that's just 5 days a week, 30 minutes of walking, where you are able to speak, but you're just a little bit out of breath. That's 60% roughly speaking. But if we want to lose weight or avoid gaining weight in the menopause, then we ought to also lift weights because that muscle is going to make sure that you're not storing that sugar as fat. So when that muscle is present, it's getting stored in the muscle for that mitochondria to use it. If not, it gets stored as fat. So that's the best way. People normally tend to do lots of crazy cardio, 1 hour. This is something else we need to think about when you are doing anything above 30 minutes. It's really stressful for the body. So if we're talking about reducing your stress levels, maybe overdoing it at the gym, or overdoing whatever exercise you're doing is probably the wrong thing to do right now. Yeah. So we need to be really smart about what we do. And so less is more. Lifting weights maybe, so walking, like I said, 5 times a week, and maybe lifting weights 3 times a week. And doing some kind of, maybe intermittent hit when you stop and start. That really helps the heart as well. And some lifting weights, maybe 3 times a week as well. It can be starting with 10 minutes, something really short, and working the bigger muscles, so legs and arms.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing on all what you're saying, Gaby, is this sense of kindness and really starting from a really simple but consistent kind of work, no? Consistency, but with kindness and going in that one step at a time. And I think it's a very good way to end the episode for today, with so many tips that you have given us, because is that element of bringing kindness to this particular moment in life, or any, for that matter, any moment in life, really. But why this moment is so important to have it and receive it with acceptance, kindness, and that sense of creating change, but literally with starting from the very simple, easy to do, what you have on hand, really, and not having to go super crazy with completely massive changes in your routine, but just creating new habits that will help you to eat the rainbow, have a good sleep hygiene, and have that muscle building that we need for being strong physically as well when we are older. So thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
We want to invite everybody that has been listening today to share this episode. If you find anything that you feel is useful for you, and share it with your colleagues and your friends. Let us know what you have learned. What are you using? What is useful for you through a comment. And we will be keen on listening from you as well. And thank you so very much for listening. And thank you once more, Gaby, for
Oh, you're
being
welcome.
here with me.
You're so welcome. Always an honor.